Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Samasta Janakalyani Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Satgurum Brahma Vidvaram. Okay, wonderful. So we'll go ahead and get started. So as I said, those, if your video is off, if you could turn it on, that would be helpful. Last week, we were at verse 12 and 13. So we'll just read those verses and move forward. Dinayaminyo sayam pratah Shishiravasanto punarayatah Kalah kridati gachatyayu Tadapi namunchat yashabayu Bhaja Govindam Bhaja Govindam Govindam Bhaja Mudhamate Kate Kanta Dhanagata Chinta Patulakim Tavanasti Niyanta Trijagati Sajjana Sangati Reka Bhavati Bhavarnavatarane Nauka Bhaja Govindam Bhaja Govindam Govindam Bhaja Mudhamate. All right. So now, last week, we took verses 12 and 13. Verse 12, the caption was, use your time to climb. In this verse, it says, Dinaya Minyao, day and night, Sayam Praptah, dusk and dawn, Shishira Vasanto, winter and spring, Punarayata, they keep coming and going. Kalah Kridati, time sports and ebbs away. Gachati Ayuhu, and our age gets older and older. Tadapina Munchati Asha Vayu, still the gust of desire doesn't leave us. So in this verse, we really talked about how precious time is and how sometimes we just waste it. And it's not that we don't have time. Many times we say, I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to do that. It's really because we waste a lot of time. And I guarantee you that all of us have that. All of us have that. We just look at how we live and really see there are certain things that we don't really need to do. There's certain things we don't need to do, but we still do them. So the idea is to live life as best as we can. And that every moment is for going higher, whether it's through doing our Dharma, whether it's engaging in Karma Yoga, whatever, whether it's a simple daily task. As long as that's being used to climb higher, then that is worth it. And a day can only be counted if we remembered God. We talked about God, we thought about God, we sang God's praise, we read about God. Only that day can be counted. Otherwise, it's not worth calling a day. We cannot count that as a day in our lives because that day doesn't have meaning. So only those days that are filled with God are countable. So use your time to climb. Then in the next verse, verse number 13, what we saw was Kate Kanta Dhanagata Chinta. Why are you worried about your husband or your wife or Vatula, oh distracted one, why are you so worried? Kim tava nasti niyanta? Don't you know that there's a ruler called God? There's a controller called God. Tejagati sajjana sangatihi eka bhavati bhavarnavattarani loka. In these three worlds, the only boat that can take us across is satsang. So in this verse, we saw that worry is an insult to God. Whenever we are worried, it's because we have forgotten God's power. There is a God, there is a divinity, there's a cosmic intelligence that has taken care of all of us from time immemorial. For so many years, God has taken care of us. Yes, sometimes we suffered, but that was also taking care of us. Remember, giving us sorrow according to our karma phala is also taking care of us. Sometimes we were happy. That's also taking care of us. Sometimes many people came to our lives. That's taking care of us. Sometimes we lost people in our lives. That's also taking care of us. So there is a cosmic intelligence. There's a cosmic ruler called God. And because of God, this whole world works. The wind blows, the sun rises and sets, and the grass grows, and the water flows, and things stay in their dharma. And that is not because of you or me. It's because of the laws of God. So whenever we worry, we're insulting that law. Everything will come as it needs to come. There's no reason I have to keep thinking, getting anxious over it. It will come when it has to come. So don't think about it so much. Just enjoy being exactly where you are. And the best way to enjoy, of course, is Trijagati Sajjana Sangati, the company of the wise, the company of the good, because they always take us to the higher. And this surely will take us across the boat of samsara. Now, these 13 verses, that is the first one, which is the chorus, plus the other 12 verses, these verses are believed to be written by Adi Shankaracharya ji himself. And therefore, they're called Dwadasha Manjarika Stotra. So this is the first part of Bhaja Govindam we have completed. Now, you all know the story. He was walking in Varanasi and he saw an older man, very, very old, must be in his 80s, and he was still studying grammar. And he said, what are you doing? This is not going to help you towards the end of your life. Seek Govinda, seek the truth, seek God. And so ex-tempo, he busted out in these verses and he sang. Now his disciples got so inspired by him. They got so inspired by him that the next set of 14 verses are from his very disciples themselves. And they each shared a verse about seeking Govinda. So that's where we'll start from today, verse number 14. So I'll go ahead and chant that, and then maybe Rashmika ji can repeat after me. Jatilo mundi lunchita keshaha.
Jatilo mundi lunchita kesha.
Kashayambara bahukrita veshaha.
Kashayambar bahukuta vesha.
Pashyanapi chana pashyati mudhaha.
Pashyanapi chana pashyati mudha.
Yudara nimittam bahukrita veshaha.
Rudara nimitam bahukruta vesha.
Very good. Now let's all chant it together. So we are on verse number 14. Jatilo mundi lunchita keshaha kashayambara bahukrita veshaha Pashyannapi chana pashyati mudha hyudara nimittam bahukrita veshaha bhaja govindam govindam bhaja mudhamati. So the caption for this verse is, don't fake perfection, live with sincerity. Don't fake perfection, live with sincerity. Verse number 14. What is he saying here? Jatilaha. Jatilaha means one with matted locks. Mundi, one with a shaven head. Lunchita keshaha, one who pulls out their hairs one by one. Kashayam bara bahukrita vesha, one who parades with ochre robes or orange robes. Pashyannapi chana pashyati mudha, those seeing doesn't see. Mudha, this fool, those seeing doesn't see. He uddara nimittam, just for the belly's sake, bahukrita veshaha, takes up these different disguises or apparels. So how does it read? One ascetic with matted locks, one with shaven head, one with hair pulled out one by one, another parading in his ochre robes. These are fools who, those seeing, do not see. Indeed, these different disguises or apparels are only for their belly's sake. So a question came that, you're talking all about that in the field of action, so many things happen to people, but what about in the field of renunciation? Do things also happen? And the answer is yes. So what is this verse talking about? This verse is talking about what we call damba or hypocrisy. Damba or hypocrisy. And this happens in all fields, sadly, even in the field of renunciation. What is damba or hypocrisy? Damba means projecting something other than what I am. So we pretend to try to be something who we're not, and especially those in uniform. So you could have a policeman or woman in uniform, and they're supposed to live up to that particular uniform and uphold law. But sometimes they themselves will accept bribery, or they themselves will result to injustice. We have someone who is in a lawyer's garb, and their dharma is, of course, to uphold justice. But sometimes they themselves will fall short of that. Somebody in a doctor's garb, wearing a doctor's uniform, who's supposed to protect patients and make sure to keep them healthy and cure them. But sometimes they're the ones who overprescribe and do unnecessary procedures just for money's sake. So sometimes we will find that in various professions, people do not live up to them. They do not live up to them, rather they fall short of it. And this is the falling short that we're talking about. This also happens in sannyasa. Sannyasa is the ashrama, the last ashrama, where people wear these orange robes or ochre robes. And we will go through what that means in a little bit. But sometimes they take on this garb, but that's not really who they are. That's not really who they are. They fall short of who they are. Sometimes they do it just for belly's sake. Sometimes they do it because they're just running away or escaping. And in fact, Swami Tapovan Maharaj, he is Swami Chinmayanandaji's guru, who's our Param Guru. He didn't like to give people sannyas. He didn't like to give people sannyas because he said, are you really, really serious about it? So what is this ashram of sannyasa? So this ashram of sannyasa is a very beautiful thing. See, it's like this. Now, the realization of the self can happen in any ashrama. It can happen in brahmacharya ashrama, even for a young child. It can happen, like it happened for Adi Shankaracharya. It can happen in grahastha ashram. It can even happen in married life. Vanaprastha ashrama can also happen in old age, after marriage, after children have settled down, when you're retired. It can also happen then. And it can also happen in sannyasa. So it can happen in any of these 4 ashramas. Then why is there this prescription of sannyasa? What sannyasa means is samyak nyasa. Nyasa means to give up. Someone who, out of their own maturity of life, because they do not anymore have the desire to be in the world, or to seek pleasure or wealth or any social thing or any name, etc., they take up this ashrama so that they can just focus exclusively on the path of self-realization. So it's not that in the other ashramas it's not possible. It is possible. But the sannyasa ashrama is that so one can focus exclusively on that, so that there's no other distraction. There is that and that alone. Because after all, that is the goal of life. So one will come to that point at some time or the other. But some prefer to go to it sooner than later. So this is what this ashram is for. And it's not that this ashram, that they take so much and they're a burden to society. And those who don't live it are a burden to society, definitely, because they're just feeding off society. But those who really live it, those who really follow the path, are a benefit to society. Their mere presence is a benefit to society, whether they do or they don't do. It's because of their purity and their austerity that everything around functions so incredibly beautifully. You will see in the lives like Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi Ji. It's not that he worked for the world or he engaged in service, but just in his presence, so many people blossomed and bloomed. So this is the ashrama of sannyasa. And why do people take these orange robes? Why do they take that particular color? Because it's like a uniform. It's a reminder. But only it's not like a uniform like other uniforms where you wear it for some part of the day and then you don't wear it anymore. It's like a 24-hour reminder that one is following this path of renunciation. And it's also that people know that not to bother them with unnecessary things, right? So we wouldn't go up to a sannyasi and talk about random stuff, because we know that their mind is in a different place. Their life is in a different place. So we wouldn't go randomly and invite them to something or talk about something so random. We wouldn't do that. So it's a reminder also to other people that this person is following this path seriously. So please be aware about it. And it's also to show society that there's another way to live. Life is not just, growing up and being in the world and living in the world, but there's also another life too. If one wishes to just leave everything and solely focus on God and God realization, that's also a choice. Sometimes people aren't aware that there is such a thing. So this is why this ashrama is there. And the color orange means that it stands for, number 1, equanimity, and 2, austerity. There is a very nice Sanskrit verse that says, see the color of the sun. When the sun rises and the sun sets, it's the same color. It's that, like orange, that blood orange. So this is to say that even if things are rising or falling, that sannyasi is always the same, always balanced. Whether things are rising or falling, that sannyasi is always balanced. And this is also to say that they have done a lot of austerity. Austerity is called tapas. Tapas comes from the root tap, which means to burn. So when one performs a lot of austerity, what happens is impurities are burnt. So a lot of impurities have been burnt from this person. And that is why kashaya, that is why the ochre or orange robes have been given to them. So it's a renunciation of the desire for the world. It's the renunciation for that ego itself. But sadly, as we said, some people stray from that path, or some people take that path just for comfort's sake. So now let us take a look at why do people do this? Not just in the path of sannyasa, but why do people fake it? And this is all of us, all of us. We've seen so many times that people fake relationships. They fake their personalities. People also fake their deaths. If they do, sometimes people fake, they appear something outside, but inside they're very different. Why do people do that? Many things. People do it for their own comfort because they're getting paid. They're getting paid. They're getting security. They're getting all of these nice lifestyle. So they're okay to fake it. They're okay to put up a front. Why else do people do it? Because they feel pressure. Sometimes they feel like because they're in a particular post or position, they feel that they have to be a certain way. They have to act a certain way. Sometimes also parents and teachers, we feel like that. We have to be a certain way. We have to act a certain way, isn't it? And sometimes it's merely to protect that very ego, to protect the reputation. So people have the need to protect that. So they pretend to be something else. They don't want to come out with their real selves. Now, what are the consequences of this? When people fake it, what happens? What happens is a lot of things. One is we never improve. Whenever we try to fake or be something else or pretend to be something else, we never improve because we're covering up so much. We're covering it up so much that we don't know what's inside of us. We don't know what's there inside of us. And so even those faults, it's like makeup. Even all those faults and flaws, we put makeup over it, makeup over it, makeup over it. But at night you remove it, and so you're aware of your flaws, But this is like permanent makeup. Make it up so much that we don't know what our flaws are. And then because we don't know what our flaws are, we don't get to work on them. We don't get to improve upon them. And we think we're lost in this illusion of perfection. See, let's get this straight. The Atman, the self, is ever perfect. That's perfection itself. So in the truest sense, you and I are already of the nature of perfection. Who you and I, the Atman, the self, that awareness. But this body, mind, and intellect will never become perfect. Body will never become perfect. The mind will never become perfect, nor will the intellect or the ego ever become perfect. But what we can do is to work with them. So what happens when we pretend, we don't improve ourselves, we don't seek help, we don't see our flaws, we forget them, or we turn a blind eye. And further, it creates a lot of consequences in society because people lose faith in the whole system. One sannyasi falls and everyone loses faith in the path of sannyasa. One person in the government becomes corrupt, everyone loses faith in the government. One journalist didn't report properly, said a wrong report, everyone loses faith in news. So because of one person's action, because of this, pretending that we are great, we are wonderful, but really we are slipping inside, everybody falls. So now the question is, what do we do? What do we do? We're not perfect. We're not perfect. We want to be better, but what do we do? The first thing to remember is that life is not between us and the world. Life is in between us and God. Life is between us and God. If we understand this very clearly, there's no need to be fake or to pretend or to try to be something we are not. At the end of the day, can we honestly look God in the eye and say, this is how I live today? Can we do that? If we can, then that means we're sincere. Who you are is who you are when nobody's looking. When you're on your own, when you're in a dark room, how are you? That is who you are. So life is not between us and everybody else. It's just between us and God. So that is the first point to remember. The second point is God is not seeking perfection in the body, mind, and intellect. God is just seeking us to be sincere. Okay, we have flaws. Okay, we have shortcomings. It's okay. It's okay. We don't have to be perfect parents or perfect teachers or perfect guides, because we are also in the process of evolution. We're in the process. What matters is our sincerity. And in fact, if we are open about this, it puts everybody at ease. Sometimes children feel so much pressure that they have to be perfect. They have to be the perfect son or daughter. They have to be perfect in academics, perfect in this, perfect in that. And so much pressure builds up on them. We don't realize how much pressure we're causing them. It's okay if they fall. It's okay if something goes wrong. But they will think it's okay when we admit, when we say, yes, I also messed up. Yes, I also did something wrong. But when we parents and teachers pretend that we're also perfect and expect our children to be okay with falling or slipping, then that's not going to work. We have to make it, we have to tell them, and we have to tell ourselves, it's okay. Because what matters is sincerity. If we're trying to be something we're not, we will never improve. But if we accept that we need help, we will. We really, really will. So that also needs to be done. The third point is to sincerely introspect in our lives. And we talked about this also in self-unfoldment. Just sit with oneself. Couple of minutes a day, right? 7-10 minutes a day, whenever you have time. Could be when you're sipping your coffee, when you're going for your walk, whatever it is. Spend time with your own mind. See where it is. What are the things that I have to improve upon? What are the things that I did okay? What are the things that I didn't do well? This bud rose thorn that we did in self-unfoldment. Practice that exercise and see what can be done. When all of this happens, then what happens is then we slowly improve, and we don't feel the need to pretend. After all, it's very, very hard to appear to be someone we're not. And what's actually beautiful is that now slowly more and more people are coming out, right? Slowly more and more people are coming out at stars and celebrities and artists and saying they have issues, and that's completely okay. So, Jatilo Mundi Lunchitakesha could be in any field. Those who are pretending to appear what they are not. Kashayam Bara Bahukritavesha. Even in the field of renunciation. Pashyannapi Chana Pashyati Mudha. Those seeing, they do not see. Means those seeing themselves, they do not see. They turn a blind eye to their faults. And they just say, okay, never mind. It's okay. Let's pretend to be something else. But this could also be applicable in a family. Sometimes for parents, it's very hard to see the flaws in their own children. So even if there are flaws in their own children, or their own children need help with something, sometimes the parents will turn a blind eye. And what happens is that problem only gets worse. Pashyannapi chana pashyati. Like in Mahabharata. In Mahabharata, how Duryodhana was there, and Dhritarashtra and Gandhari knew They knew what Duryodhana was, but they chose to turn a blind eye. And because of that, his behavior got so much worse, and the whole Mahabharata war started. So this is what happens. Those see, they do not see. Hyudara nimittam bahukrita. People just end up then living for their comforts, for their own lifestyle, for their own reputation, just to protect their ego. They end up living this way. So what Adi Shankaracharya ji is trying to say is, don't fake that perfection. We will never reach God with faking or hypocrisy or dambha. Be sincere. Live with sincerity. Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Govindam Bhaja Mudapate. And seek Govinda, seek Govinda. Okay. Now, we will touch upon the review of the previous verses. So this is the 14th verse, but as I said, the first 13 verses, the chorus, and then the next 12 verses after that were verses by Adi Shankaracharya ji. So I thought what we should do today is kind of just take a review of what we've done so far so that we know what we covered, and then we can move on from there. Okay? So now let's go through this journey, and then after that, I will also ask you what you've remembered from Bhaja Govindam, because many times we study, but then we don't go through it again, and then everything is forgotten. So we're going through now verse number 1. Verse number 1, what is the key there? Evolve and don't revolve. Evolve and don't revolve. Life is for seeking the truth. Life is for realizing the truth. And so he says here, Bhaja Govindam, Govindam Bhaja Mudamate. And in this verse also, we saw who is a fool? We are all fools. Why? F-O-O-L. The one who focuses on the outer and on the lower is called fool. Every time that we're focusing on anything outer, be it the outer sheath or these instruments which I am not, or focusing on the lower, we are being fools. And he said, whatever secular knowledge that you're learning, it might help you earn a living, but it will not help you evolve in life. Therefore, seek Govinda, seek deeper. In verses 2 and 3, what we saw is how to get over lust and greed. So in verse 2 particularly, it said that sometimes we get stuck in the thirst for wealth. So here we reviewed that wealth. What is the purpose of wealth? Wealth is for dharma. Remember, wealth is for dharma. Wealth is so we can do our duties, and that dharma is to take us to moksha, to liberation. If I take wealth and I go crazy with it, I will not come to moksha. It will not come to moksha. Wealth is to do my dharma well. And that dharma, upon doing well, I get purified and I make my way to moksha. That's the connection. If I don't make that connection, I will go crazy in this world and I will not come to Govinda. So there is no problem with wealth. It's just understanding what wealth is for. Next is, in the third, we saw about lust. That sometimes we can get caught up in this attraction for other people. And here we saw Pratipaksha Bhavana. Pratipaksha Bhavana is like a Vedantic X-ray. Vedantic X-ray meaning always to see something for what it truly is. So we might see some glitz, some glamour, some wonderful thing, but what's really inside, it's all temporary. It's all going to go away. So have that vision that whenever we're tempted to do something which we should not do, when we're tempted to transgress something where we should not go, look at it for what it really is. This is called Pratipaksha Bhavana, seeing it with a Vedantic vision. And here also we learned that this body is an instrument of service. It is not a field of attraction. That's not what the body is made for. It's an instrument of service. And that the marriage is very, very holy because it's to bring forth that progeny and to expand that service into the world. That is the beautiful purpose of it. Then in verses 4 and 5, we saw how the world is really impermanent. In verse 4, we saw how the world is impermanent, that uncertainty is completely certain. Anything can happen at any given moment in time. So it says, seek Govinda, seek Govinda. There's this story in Srimad Bhagavatam. It's a very nice story, and this is how the Bhagavatam is told. There is a very noble king, King Parikshit. And King Parikshit was very noble. But one day he was in the forest, he was roaming about the forest, and he got very, very hungry and very thirsty. And there was nothing there to eat. So he saw a rishi, Shamika Rishi, was meditating. And he went to ask for water, but obviously the rishi is meditating. So he didn't notice anything, he didn't hear anything. And so Parikshit got so mad. This Parikshit is, by the way, is the grandson of Arjuna. Got so mad, he put a dead snake on Shamika Rishi. As Shamika Rishi is meditating, he didn't know. So Parikshit left. When Shamika Rishi's son came, Shringi, and saw the dead snake, he got so upset and he cursed Parikshit. He said that King Parikshit will be bitten by a snake in 7 days, and he only has 7 days to live. And so King Parikshit went back to his kingdom. When he went back to his kingdom, he found out about the curse. And now look at the beauty of this king. He didn't say, let's find out how to heal me from a snake bite. He didn't say anything. He didn't invest so much money to heal him from a snake bite. He said, I have 7 days to live. All I want to do is to listen to the name and glory of God. So he left everything. He crowned his son. He went to the banks of the river and he said, I want to listen to the story of God. And all the rishis gathered. And Sri Shukadeva came and gave him the Bhagavatam. This is what he did with his life. So this verse is to tell us that everything is uncertain. Every day, if we just spend every day walking closer to divinity, then at least we're at peace. We have lived. We can say we have lived. Verse 5 and verse 6, we saw, drop the world before the world drops you. So if you remember this, that people will be in our lives. This is true in all walks. People will be with us as long as we can give them something, as long as we are of use to them, as long as we have some kind of talent that they're deriving from, we have some kind of wealth, ability. As long as we have that, they'll be with us. The minute we lose it, they'll also go. So the fact is that people will drop us when we are no more useful to them. But we also do the same with other people, so we shouldn't feel so bad. So therefore, drop the world before the world drops you. That means become independent. Start finding the joy within, so that when it happens, it doesn't trouble us so much. But everyone, including our own near and dear ones, will do this. And it even showed in verse number 6 that when the body dies, they don't even call it by my husband, my wife, my mother, my father. They say, take it away. That's a dead body. Take it away. I don't want it. This is how we treat a dead body. So keep this in mind. Seek Govinda. Then we saw in verse 7 and 8 how seeking is a priority. How it's easy to get lost. It's easy to forget about seeking. It's easy to put seeking in the back seat. And people tell us, oh, you're so young. Why are you doing all of this? No. Seeking is a priority here and now. If we think when we grow older, we can get deeper into it, think again. Verse number 15, which we're going to cover, will tell us what happens when we get older. That you will see next week. When we get older, it's more challenging to seek. So wherever we are right now, right here, seek Govinda. In verse number 8, we saw the purpose of family. We saw how the student was asking, who Adi Shankaracharya ji rather was asking, who is your wife? Who is your husband? Ka te kanta kaste putraha. And this samsaro yamativa vichitraha. This samsara is really wonderful. Kasya tvam kahakuta ayata. Of who are you and where did you come from? Tattvam chintaya. Think about that truth. Tadiha brata. Think about that truth. Who's your husband? Who's your wife? Who's your child? And in here, what was pointed out was family is not the final destination of life. Family is a field of purification. It's a very, very beautiful ashrama where together as husband, wife, children, people can purify themselves, make themselves more able and more ready to realize this truth. But at the end of the day, we have to go beyond that also. Because being a mother, being a father, a child, etc., that is just your role. That is just a role that we are playing. That is all. That role belongs to the ego. We are the self, that supreme self. So that mother is my role. Father is my role. Sister is my role. Brother is my role. But what is really, really me? Who is me? I am that pure self. When we have this clarity, it becomes very easy to perform our roles. We can perform it with a spirit of detachment. Otherwise, we get so attached to our children. But here, we said that children are jivas on a journey. They're just journeying through us. They're a jiva also. This was not their first life. This might not be their last life. They're just coming and they'll also go. It's not my child, it's not my daughter, my son. It has come through me. That's all. So here he says, think deeply. In verse number 9, what we saw was the power of satsang. How important satsang is, because we can get so distracted in life, so distracted. And sometimes we can feel so alone also on the path. But this satsang, this group satsang, reminds us it's a constant reminder that we have to seek. Yeah, you might say we might have heard it before, we know it already, but this impression has to be made. It has to go deeper. It can't be just a flash. It has to go really, really deep. And satsang is the place for that. Satsang also is a trigger. Something inside of us. We don't know which satsang. We don't know what word. We don't know what sentence. Something can really trigger us to change. And we saw that in the story of Narad Rishi and Ratnakar. And that's why satsang. In satsang also, so we don't become complacent. Sometimes we think we know everything already. We're living such a great life. We are on the path. Think again. One can always go deeper. One can always do more. So that's why satsang. And that takes us to liberation in life. Verse 10, we saw, was ignorance is the root cause of suffering. So it's not that I have problems, I am the problem. It's not that you have problems, you are the problem. Why we have problems in life is because we are identifying with the body, mind, and intellect. Whenever we identify with this body, the mind, the intellect, really when we identify with the ego, all kinds of problems come to us. But when we disidentify from the ego, we are free. And verse number 11, we saw that, let's say somebody says, okay, I'm not suffering right now. Verse number 11 said, think again, because time can, this Maya can take away anything in a moment's notice. It says, Harati nimeshat kalaha sarva. Don't take pride in wealth, in youth, in our possessions, because anything can be taken away in an instant. Then what will you do? Therefore, better be safe. Seek Govinda, seek Govinda. This alone is security. Seeking God alone is security. It is more security than any life insurance policy that we will procure. And verses 12 and 13, we saw how time is fleeting. So use that to seek God. And 13, how worry is an insult to God. So like this is the first part of Bhaja Govindam. And then next week, we will take on the next 15 and 16. We will see why not delay seeking till when we grow very old. He will tell us how a person grows old and what happens. Okay, so I'll stop here